here I've got Swiss chard. I love Swiss chard, and I grow a whole garden of it every year, and I use it all. I tend to, when I harvest kale, I harvest Swiss chard with the kale, and eat them together. I cook them in. I'll show videos on this. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I would do a video today showing you what's on the menu. It's the end of July 2019, and this is an idea I had for a video. I don't think I've done one like this before. I mean, I've done garden tours, but I've not really done a brief walkthrough just showing what we're eating right now. You know, people have asked me lots of times, what do you do with all that food? And why don't you sell it at a farmer's market, that sort of thing. As they see my garden, they think it's a really big garden. And it is a big garden compared to what most backyard gardeners grow. But in terms of how much food it produces, if we had to live off the food that this garden produces, it wouldn't be big enough. I actually did a podcast about that. I can't remember what it was called, sustainability or something like that. Way back, I did a podcast doing the math. I think I worked out that if I just converted this entire area to potatoes, to only grew potatoes in the whole garden, I'd have just enough food for me. 2,000 calories a day for a year. So, you know, give or take, right? Yeah, you know, if by just growing potatoes I'd just have enough food for me to maintain my weight, there certainly aren't growing enough for 4 people here. So the question of what do we do with all that food is that we eat it. We eat everything. And how do you do that? Well, you organize your diet around what's available in your garden, and you plant things that everybody likes to eat, and you plant the right amount of those things. I would say a good portion of my garden is root veg, things that store easily, or vegetables that I like my pickles that I preserve, right? So you know, a large portion of what I'm growing in my garden is stuff that's stored and eaten later. And of course, I also grow things that I can eat, you know, right now. So let me take you around and show you what's going on in that respect. Okay, so let's have a look. So here we are at the entrance of the garden, and I've got lettuce that was sown as soon as the soil could be worked back in early April, late March. You know, under cold frames, and moved out here when it was a certain size. But anyway, this lettuce is basically, that's what it looks like when it's about to bolt. This is a romaine. It's called Paris Coste. It's like a romaine lettuce, and it's done. So I mean, we're eating as much lettuce as we can. It's hard to plant just the right amount of lettuce to eat it all before it bolts, and I always err on planting a bit too much. So there's the lettuce. I got the kale here, and all I do is, you know, use the cut and come again method. And this is a good little tidbit here. You can see this plant, this lower leaf. I've waited too long to harvest this, so you can see how it's changing color. It's really not good anymore. So what you want to do with a kale is, you know, once the leaves, the lower leaves, once they become the lower leaves, like this one, that's a good example. So this one here still has its color, looks good. Right, but it's going to lose its color really soon because it's not getting as much sun, right? The leaves on top. So this one needs to come off, right? So tonight when we cook up some kale, I'll add this to the mix, right? And so on and so forth. So about every other day I would go through, look at all my kale, and just remove the lower leaves that have to come off. If I don't use them, they'll end up, you know, they'll end up like this. So you take off, see the difference? Right, good, not so good. Right, so you just remove the leaves that need to come off because they're going to change color anyway and just become, I find those tend to be the ones that the slugs attack. They don't seem to attack this nice green stuff at the top at this stage in the plant's development anyway. They attack the lower leaves that are starting to turn color. They seem to prefer attacking those. Anyway, so we got kale, and of course we got lots of herbs. What else is ready to eat? I'm just going to walk around here. Lots of kale. Beans are not ready yet. My garlic is ready to be harvested. So any one of these, you know, as I need it. I mean, it's not really time to harvest garlic yet, but basically if I need a garlic, I can pull it. I would wait maybe another 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think this plant looks dead enough to wholesale harvest all my garlic and dry them out. The tips are just beginning to die off. I've got other garlic elsewhere in the garden that look a little further along. But anyway, certainly there's a big enough bulb down there that I could pull it if I needed it, and that's what I do. From this point in the year on, I don't really buy garlic. I make pesto out of the scapes, and I use that. I basically make 2 kinds of pesto, and I didn't really cover this in the pesto video. I make kind of like an Italian type, that would go with Italian Mediterranean type foods, which I use as a garlic substitute. And I also make what I call Asian pesto, which is just garlic scapes with some sesame seed oil and stuff like that. That it would, there isn't too many stir-fry type meals I make without adding garlic and sesame seed oil and soy sauce. So I put that all in with the scapes and just whiz it up into like a butter, and you throw that in there, and that's just a way to use the scapes and preserve them. You put those in little jars and put them in the freezer and use them. So that way I don't have to pull too many garlic. But anyway, this time of year, if I need garlic, I pull it. What's on the menu here? So I've got these kale, certainly ready to go. This is the sort of Siberian kale or red Russian kale. This is the winter boar kale that's on the menu. These parsnips, certainly not. This garden here where I planted direct seeded eggplants, certainly not ready yet, but this summer savory, if I needed it, I could certainly use it. I'm going to let it grow a good deal longer until I think it's a good time to take it out and dry it. This will all be a dried herb that I just use. Goodness, I can't believe how vigorous these come in. I've been growing winter savory, which is a perennial, for years, but this summer savory comes in so fast. And this is basically teeny tiny seeds a couple months ago, and now it's coming like crazy. It's certainly enough savory to get me through the year. These broccolini, I just snapped off a bunch of them the other day and used them in a stir fry. But anyway, these are ready, right? Here's one. Here's a floret. They're not huge, but you snap them off down about here, right? And you eat the whole stem. Look, there's a snail on my broccoli. Get out of there. Over here, I've got Swiss chard. I love Swiss chard, and I grow a whole garden of it every year, and I use it all. I tend to, when I harvest kale, I harvest Swiss chard with the kale, and eat them together. Just sort of cook them in. I've shown videos on this. Just throw it in a wok with a bit of garlic and whatever kind of flavoring you like. That's how I like it as a side dish. I've got plenty of peas. This is some sort of thorny bush coming in from the forest, but plenty of nice big fat peas. Basically, every second day we have peas. I always plant too many peas. So we eat a lot of peas this time of year, and by the time the peas are done producing, we're kind of tired of eating them. This is a lettuce bed that's just about done. This mentioned in an earlier video, the Edox variety of lettuce. That's what this is. It's extremely late bolting, I have to say. I'm really impressed with it in that sense. In the flavor department, it's kind of bitter. You wouldn't want to make a whole salad out of it. You want to mix it in with something else. It's a beautiful, vibrant color, and certainly adds an accent to a salad in that respect. But it's bitter, what's that called? It's not coming to mind. Like radicchio, only more bitter. Chicory. It has a flavor similar to that, even though it's not chicory. It's got that sort of bitterness. At least it's my experience of chicory. So Edox it's called. Very late bolting. You can see that these romaine have all bolted, right? They're all done. I basically got to pull these and plant something else here. Plant a fall crop here, maybe spinach or something. And I'll have to get after that really soon. These beets are definitely ready. In fact, this is the first year I've ever seen this, but a lot of these beets are bolting. Look at that. So maybe I need to start pulling some of these. I'm used to just leaving my beets in the whole season, but it's been so hot this year. Perhaps it's the variety that I tried. I try different varieties every year. But I got maybe every 12th or 20th one is bolting. But anyway, got beets, lots of beet greens. These carrots still aren't really big enough yet, in my opinion, to harvest. I have carrots here, but I'm not really into the carrots yet. And they taste better when you harvest them in the fall. I basically, for me, carrots are fall food. I might pull some this time of year just to, if I'm thinning out the garden, right? You got to thin your carrots if you want big ones. I know lots of people say just leave them, but I get better results by thinning them. So I mean, if I'm eating carrots, it's because I'm thinning them. But they're really not that big right now. Even though these are a good size. Let's just pull one and see here. That one looks good. Just curiosity's sake. There we go. Yeah, not bad, right? Use my hand span. I'd say that's about a 7 incher. Right, and they'll just keep growing right up until it gets cold. So, if you thin these, they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just find people will say, "Why are you so focused on everything being big?" But they just store better when they're big, and they're easier to process. In terms of cleaning them up and peeling them and so on. It's just easier to deal with large vegetables in the kitchen, right? In my opinion, anyway. They're easier to hang on to and easier to cut up and deal with. So I tend to like growing everything big. So yeah, we got carrots. Lots of rhubarb, of course, but you can only eat so much rhubarb. We'll freeze some of it in cakes in the freezer and use it off and on during the winter for rhubarb crisps. But really the only thing I do with my rhubarb is make rhubarb crisp or rhubarb crumble, some people call it. You can only eat so much of that, and then you start having to see the dentist or do more sit-ups. It's really not the rhubarb you're after, it's the rolled oats and the brown sugar. I got tons of peas here, and again we're just barely keeping up with these. Probably going to have a big feed of them today and tomorrow and the next day. I got beans down the bottom, but they're really not the beans are just beginning to be beans, but another week or so before these will be on the menu. Close, right? This one looks pretty close, but still not big enough. I got potatoes here, but I still don't think they're ready. The flowers are just forming. Of course, these pole beans aren't ready yet. These are rattlesnake pole beans. Getting close. They're flowering, but not ready yet. Got lots of dill all over the place. Just waiting for my pickles to need dill. Blueberries are still a good few weeks off. Man, these ones are coming in really nice, eh? Look at that. I love blueberries, but anyway, we're not ready yet. Probably more of a mid-August sort of deal, but the blueberries are ready. They're getting close to ready. Here's another thing, the lovage. You can always use that if you need celery in a dish, a soup or a pasta or whatever. And underneath this apple tree, it's a good size, it's not huge, I guess, but anyway, underneath this apple tree and behind the lovage, I've got these little romaine lettuce tucked in here. And I did this because it's shady. I thought they'd be a bit slower to bolt, and they have been, right? I mean, all my romaine is pretty much bolted, but these are still, on the menu, so to speak. Although this one looks like it's bolted a bit, right? Anyway, they're not huge. They didn't, this soil isn't, I'm always developing the soil throughout my garden, and this little path, this actually was a walking path right up until I planted these lettuce here, right? This bed stopped here, and there was this area here was a walking path last year, so it'll take a couple years for that soil to come along, but still, good enough to, these are basically lettuce that were growing somewhere else that I just popped in here to see how they do underneath this tree, and it seems to have worked. And they're not going to win any awards from them, but they haven't bolted. That's the main thing. They're edible and they'll be ready to go. And finally, out here in my garden with the tomatoes, I thought I'd just show, these are the tomatoes I direct seeded, I don't know, sometime in May under a plastic dome. The dome is just fired off into the woods over there. Anyway, so these were direct seeded outside, and this plant here is over 3 feet high, despite the fact that it was only sowed around the end of May, right? So it was a seed a couple months ago. So it's not bad. So anyway, I don't have tomatoes yet. I know there's some people that, if they started them in their basement under lights or in their bow window in March, maybe they have tomatoes. But I got flowers, but I don't have tomatoes yet. But I'm totally cool with how things are looking with these tomatoes. These are looking good. Oh, I guess also it bears mentioning, here's the tree collards that I started under that little, almost like a glass box, I guess. Good size so far, looking pretty good. Tree collards, kohlrabi, and this is kohlrabi that I moved a few weeks ago. It seems to have recovered okay and is doing fine. So we got kohlrabi. I mean, you grow kohlrabi to eat the root, right? There's the root down there. But I like the greens, so I'll come out and take the greens. If you're a fan of collard greens, kohlrabi greens are almost identical in flavor, but they'll cook in a minute. So instead of having to do that long simmer that collard green, I mean, I'm not saying I don't like collard greens with all the things that it's a good dish making big pot of collard greens, but if you're in a rush, you can sort of get your collard green fix by cooking up the kohlrabi greens. You can use all the same ingredients. You just, in a minute or two, they basically have wilted down and they've gotten soft. One more thing I forgot to mention was these zucchini. So I ate my first zucchini last night out of this garden. I just picked a couple this morning. These are the couple larger ones in the garden right now. Right, it's not bad for this part of the world. If you're getting zucchini in July, you're doing good. Right, got a yellow one right there. Can't remember all the different varieties I planted here, but really happy with my zucchini, and they're definitely on the menu right now. So that's one more thing we can pull out of the garden and eat. Anyway, that's where we are right now. That's what's on the menu right now. Lots of things. Basically, every single day we try to eat as much food as we possibly can out of here. None of the long winter storage vegetables are ready right now, and that's good because we're busy harvesting peas and kale and things like that. And you might look at my garden and say, my goodness, you got too much kale. How can you possibly eat all of that? Well, this time of year is when I begin to store kale. And I've done videos on this. The excess, for a given meal, I'll pick enough for the meal. And if it seems like there's more kale that needs to be picked at that point in time, I'll take all the excess, just blanch it down very quickly, and pack it into a plastic container and put it in the freezer. And then the next day you just pop that little kale cake out of the plastic container and put it in a bag in the freezer, and you've got kale for when you want it all winter long, sort of thing. So by using that method, I basically was eating my own kale on a weekly basis right up until March last year, I think. So and I basically do that with every kind of green, and I don't really keep track. I just put them all together, and whenever I want to mess of greens with something, take one of those out. So that's why you can grow a lot of greens, more greens than you can possibly keep up with in a going season. I mean, you wouldn't want to eat kale every single day. You wouldn't want to eat peas or beans every single day. So with those things, yes, I am growing more than I could possibly keep up with in terms of meals, unless we ate them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which would be very boring. So all you do is you just blanch and freeze them, and then you've got them for when you need them. I mean, there's also ways to preserve and so on, and canning and so on and so forth, but I find blanching and freezing the easiest way to put down and store stuff for the winter. That's just my take on it. Anyway, quick little walkthrough of what's on the menu. I hope that was useful for you and gave you a sense of how I organize my diet around the garden, and what's possible in terms of keeping your own garden and staying on top of. I think the worst thing that can happen to a gardener is they've got too much of something and they can't give it away, and they don't know what to do with it, and it all ends up in the compost bin. So it's I've been thinking about doing a podcast on this general topic about deciding how much of each thing to plant so that you don't have too much of anything, and you've got just the right amount that you can keep up with and get the most value out of your garden in terms of food. I'll keep mulling that over, but this video, I guess, was me toying around with those ideas and just showing you this time of year anyway what's driving the diet right now in my house anyway. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com, And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.